Alright, this will probably be my last video this evening. Trying to catch up because I probably won't make a few. It'll probably be like 3 days before I make another one. So, Genesis 11. Remember, we just went through the lineages. Talked about Japheth becoming Europe, Ham becoming Africa, and Shem becoming Asia. All that jazz. Remember how in Ham's line, Cush begets Nimrod, alright? Now Canaan is the one who's really cursed in Ham's line, but it is also from Ham's line that Cush comes from. Alright. Verse 1. And the whole earth was of one language, and of one speech. And it came to... Alright. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. All Noah's kids spoke the same language. Shocking. Verse 2. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. Remember, Iraq, Iran area. And they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime and had they for mortar. So slime they had for mortar, and they made bricks. Alright, so... yeah, it's Iraq is the area of Shinar, and this is where Babylon comes from, so this is where a lot of the ancient civilizations originate in. So, what's interesting, they would have preferred to make stone, is what most people believe, most of archaeologists or theologians, but they decided to make brick. What's interesting is how they knew how to make brick. You know, again, problem-solving skills, but why would they want to make brick? I mean, who knows? It's... obviously, like I say, I always talk about all the theories. There's tons of theories about, you know, fallen angels and the seed of the serpent and all that stuff coming into play and getting hidden knowledge. I mean, I'm sure people have probably heard or seen Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. Now, obviously, there's the same theory, only coming from the biblical aspect that these are fallen angels, not aliens. My friends and I always laughed about that show, that after like season 2 they were really reaching. You know, it was really interesting in the beginning because they would show like underwater pyramids and stuff like that that had to have been dated from like 30,000 years ago, and giant blocks that we can't even make with the precision cutting today and weigh so much, how they get to the top of the Incan Mountains and all this stuff. And it was always, of course, aliens. No other explanation. That's it. Just aliens, obviously. Alright, so after the flood, basically what happened, speaking of these ancient aliens, everything had been wiped out. So they kind of are building on top of these old cities, what's left of them. A lot of them, like they found tons of them in the Mediterranean and stuff. So the ones that are left probably aren't even the major cities. They're just what was left made of stone. And they're building on top of them most of the time, making brick in this case. Alright, going on. Verse 4, And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Alright, so make us of us a name, naming a nation. Maybe it means making a flag, a crest, something to be known by, you know. And this is why symbology is so big in a lot of these occult areas. And it all stems right here. You know, they want to make something that allows them to be known in some way. So make us a name. What I'm curious of here, is this Nimrod speaking? Or is this just the people speaking? It's of Nimrod's camp. Did they do this and then Nimrod took power after they made this announcement and started? It's not really clear like what's going on here as far as who's doing the speaking. And they said, you know, blah, blah, blah. All right. Verse 5. Wait, why am I talking about cubits in my notes over here? Did I miss a thing about cubits? All right. Verse 4. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city whose top may reach the heavens, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Verse 5, and the Lord came down to the city and the tower, which the children of men built. Why does it say builded? Verse 6, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one. All right, I'm going to stop right there before I go any further. Like I said, is this Nimrod? That's just confusing. So is it the people? We already went over that. The gist of it so far is they're starting to get arrogant, is what it sounds like. It's the beginning stages of we're better than God, is we can make ourselves a greater civilization. I mean, we'll get into it when we get into Samuel and everything, but basically the Israelites eventually start asking for a king, and God gives them one, but he's like, why do you need a king? All right, this is what's going to happen. He's going to take your boys to serve in his militaries for wars that you're not a part of, and he's going to take your money for taxes. Again, I said this before, God's kind of an anarchist. Why can't you just serve him? So I'm not saying you should be an anarchist. I'm just saying that's pretty much what's going on here the entire time. Live by my laws. Organize a structure around my laws in your own hearts. Why can't you just do that? All right. Verse 5 here and 6. I'm going to read starting at 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. Again, builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. So in verse 5 here, when it says, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, God is all-knowing and omnipotent. When it says the Lord came down, again, this is my interpretation, but that's Christ. Christ is coming down. Okay, Christ was here from the beginning. This is Christ's world. So, I mean, yes, Satan is the prince of this world, but Christ is the king. Okay? So, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. End of verse 5. In verse 6, it says, and the Lord said, behold, remember, said, he's the Word. Christ is the Word. Behold, the people is one, and they have one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. So Christ went down, he comes back, and he makes a report to his fathers, what I'm getting out of this. Okay, yeah, they're doing all these things. Anything that they imagine, they think that they can do and should do. They have no restraint. Doesn't matter. So it's sort of like Aleister Crowley stuff, like do what thou will. Whatever your will desires is what you can do. And because they're still kind of living long lives and they're gaining a lot of knowledge, who knows who from, fallen angels, ancient aliens, all those theories, or just being smarter because law of thermodynamics, they were still closer to the original creation, not further and further away with less and less ability. So either way, they think that they can accomplish anything. They think they can be like God. And that's what's beginning to happen. Now, it seems so innocent to us, but that's just because this is just a history of stuff that the Hebrews already took for granted. They knew based on other stories they've been told. This is their just quick notes, and then obviously in like a history class, the teacher would present more information and background upon this. That's obviously what was happening. We think they were talking about in the temple all the time. Like, this is just like this is the book you buy for your history class, but the information in there isn't in all. Even the information there is referencing other stuff. That's what Genesis is, okay? So moving on, verse 8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. It just seems odd. Because it's ironically exactly what they feared earlier in this same reading. They were afraid that they would be scattered, so they wanted to form a crest when they decided to build their tower to reach the heavens. Let's build us a tower and let us form us a sign, or whatever it is that they call it, a signal, something so that we will be known in case we are scattered upon the face of the earth. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth. So probably what's happening is these people they're probably living together, building the city, as one overall group that's being controlled or ruled by Nimrod, this mighty hunter. But there's no sacredness, there's no morality really. It's kind of each do what thou will. Nimrod's the king, and serve him, but you can each worship your own gods that call for all kinds of different things. Oh, your God calls for child sacrifice. Okay, your God calls for you to whip yourself, and whatever. All these different things, different gods that they worship, and they're staying in their own little cultures, their own little family organizations. I mean, they're living in a city, working together under Nimrod because he was a mighty hunter who gained a following from a bunch of different family groups. But they all still stayed within their family groups. They weren't like, they didn't want to. I don't know if it was that they didn't want to mix together, but that's what happened. God made them each speak their own language, and that happened most likely because they were staying within their own families. And they probably thought that they had, because a lot of religions that aren't Christianity, it's all about hidden knowledge. So they would not want to share the knowledge that they have, that they got from their father, with this other lineage, because they think they have more information. It's not about sharing the truth like Christ teaches and what God teaches. A lot of these more evil civilizations, whatever, say what you will, but it's all about hidden knowledge. So they're hiding their knowledge, they're speaking kind of within themselves. Over a while, they're developing their own jargon, and their own languages start to develop. And over time, because they haven't been really communicating with one another, they've been isolating themselves too much, boom, their languages have changed so much they can't communicate with one another, and they scatter upon the face of the earth. And that's why it's called Babel. Now, I'm not saying this is any kind of a political statement for isolation versus anything like that. I'm simply saying that's probably how it happened. Now, of course, I'm not saying Christ doesn't have the power to just snap his fingers and everyone speaks different language. I totally accept that as what could have happened. He's Christ. But more than likely, this is what's happening. And when you look at it that way, I think there's a message. There's nothing wrong with staying close-knit with your family and wanting to, kind of stay with people who kind of think the same way as you in a certain sense. But you want to find commonalities among all kinds of different people. When we get to the book of Daniel, we'll talk about how God tells you to live in a civilization among non-believers. And he tells you basically to participate in the society and the community. And really Christ tells us that that's going to win people over to Christianity. Is showing how good of a person you are and living a good life. Alright, I got way hung up on there. So, let's move on. Verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 530 years and begat Salah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Salah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Salah lived after he begat Eber 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 230 years and begat Sereg. I love these names. Suggest them to your wife, I tell you what. And Reu lived after he begat Sereg 207 years and begat sons and daughters. And Sereg lived 30 years and begat Nahor. And Sereg lived after he begat Nahor 200 years and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 190 years. So Terah, remember that one. And begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So Nahor is the grandson of Nahor. So don't get those two confused, because I'm going to go back over those generations in a second. Abram becomes Abraham, obviously. Abram is his name before he accepts God, basically. Kind of like Jacob's name becomes Israel and that sort of thing. And his father is Terah. So let's rewind to the beginning of that. Now, if you remember earlier, we did genealogies before the flood up into Noah, and that's just so boring. But when you take time to look into it, it's quite fascinating. You remember, there's a history book. There's a story behind what's being said. It's up to you to seek it out. I think it's in Timothy where it talks about the need to study, But anyway, that's what we're doing, or I'm doing. I should say I don't think I have any viewers right now. So let's go over these genealogies here. Now, starting all the way back on verse 10. Remember I said in my last video, after the flood, they start living less and less and less and less, until, like Genesis 6 says, about 120 is supposed to be the basic lifespan of a human being. So, and I think that's still what it's supposed to be today. I really do. I think he leveled us off right here, and if we all ate and lived a healthy lifestyle, which I totally don't. I mean, I don't live completely unhealthy. I take care of myself for the most part, but I obviously don't do everything the right way. So I probably won't make it to 120. And I know I'm not treating my body like a temple, but we are all sinners. That being said, it makes sense when you look at the Mediterranean diet and things like that. 120 really is what you would expect if everyone's living a healthy lifestyle. If everyone's living by God's law, 120 would be the average lifespan. And that's not to say if you die younger, you're like a terrible person. It's just you're probably not taking care of your body. And that's the fact. Alright, so verse 10. Shem lives to be 602. Then Arphaxad, who we learned in our previous one, let me flip back to it. Arphaxad is the son of Shem. And Shem where's it at? Sorry about this, I should say. Alright, here we are. Arphaxad becomes the Babylonians. So, Shem's son, Arphaxad, lives to be 438. His lineage goes on to be the Babylonians. Arphaxad's son lives to be 433, who is Salah. Salah's son, Eber, lives to be 464. Eber's son, Peleg, lives to be 239. His son, Ru, lives to be 239. Sereg lives to be 230. Nahor, who is Abraham's grandfather, lives to be 148. And then we get to Terah. And that is basically when we get to verse 27. So that's the lineage that we get to. So remember, there are 3 sons born to Terah, and like I just said, they're slowly getting less and less lives, which goes totally with the second law of thermodynamics. I believe it's the second law. Again, I'm just a simple man, but I know there's a law of thermodynamics where it talks about things are constantly moving towards a state of chaos, away from their original energy source, and less over time. So, Terah has Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now, they're not named there in order as far as who's the eldest. Just remember that. That's just Abram's the most known one, obviously. So now we get to verse 27. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. Oh, so right there. Haran is Lot's dad. Now, we'll get into Lot very soon here in the next few chapters. If you know your Bible and all, well, Lot's not like a big name character, but he's the nephew of Abraham, and Abraham has a lot of stuff to do with Lot. Throughout, a lot of the stories involve Lot in the Old Testament, especially in Genesis, I mean. Alright, so it just wants to give mention of that. In fact, Lot, even though he is of a different bloodline, because the Hebrews were all about these bloodlines things. Even though he's not of Abraham's, Lot's line, they show how it comes back in later on into Christ's bloodline, even though Christ is Son of God. It's just like they make a big deal about it, so I look into it because it's in the Bible. But I'm pretty sure all the messages of Christ kind of throw all that bloodline stuff totally out the window. And I think that's kind of what made people so mad at Christ at the time, because they're all like, "What? So our bloodlines aren't what's important?" Anyway, Abraham is Asian. That's interesting. You ever see? I know the Time magazine did one a while ago where it's like a famous painting of Abraham. He's such the quintessential Zeus-looking guy all the time, or he's got a long white beard and he's Caucasian as can be. But Abraham is of Shem's line, and Shem is the father of Asia, according to the Bible. So Abraham is Asian, which would mean Christ is Asian. All right. Verse 28. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So the Chaldees, the city of Ur, is a known city in archaeology and ancient history. So this is where Haran died before his father Terah. So Haran is Lot's dad. Haran is Abraham's brother, and he died. Now, I'm going to get off the Bible here because when I think it's relevant, I will always mention non-canonical books that lend a little more to these side stories. And these, you don't have to believe these because that's not what's important. It's just interesting and fun to talk about, and it answers some questions. And it never changes anything about Christ's message. So, the book of Jasher is a good one for this particular story. And take it for what you will, but basically in the book of Jasher, remember, Noah and Shem, as we learned in the last chapter, they're still alive at this time. Noah's still alive. Shem is definitely still alive. So these people are living for a long time. Noah lives a godly life. Basically what happens is Abraham kind of goes away. I won't get into the story of why. And learns about God and everything from Noah. Because Terah, his father, wasn't really a godly man. He, by today's standards, we wouldn't consider him evil, but he worshipped, quite literally, he worshipped false gods, knowing they were false gods, and he just either didn't believe or didn't accept the God of Noah, which was still being taught, it just wasn't, being spread. Nimrod was in power, and Nimrod was all about self-serving, serving thyself, Clearly, they must have feared Noah and Shem lived secludedly, and they get into that in Jasher. They lived secludedly, but again, they were also feared. So I think on the outliers of this huge civilization of Nimrods, there was still followers. They just kind of left these people alone, is what it seems to be. But anyway, why it mentions in 28 there, again, one more time. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of nativity in Ur and the Chaldees. Now we got to establish that Haran dies because Lot is very referenced, and Abraham's kind of taking care of him, looking after him throughout the next few chapters of Genesis. But why does Haran die? It doesn't state why, because the Hebrews already kind of knew or had the stories why. Again, this is just a history book. You then talk more in detail about the history itself. This is like your textbook in the classroom. So basically what happened is Abraham comes back. He knows that God is God. He did all these tests. He didn't test God, but he was just like, should I worship the sun? No, it sets. It's not, I don't see it when it goes over the edge, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at all these other gods that people worshipped, and he learned from Noah and Shem. And he realized that there's only one true God, and he got to know God himself, which is what we'll get into with Abraham here. And what happens in Jasher, basically, is that they get thrown into a fire, and Abraham lives and Haran dies. So Abraham knew that his dad, he was like pissed off because his dad was worshiping these like wooden false gods after he'd come back from studying with Noah and Shem, and he's like, this is, but he still was kind of honoring his dad, but he's kind of like mischievous too. So he got a bunch of meat to offer as a sacrifice to these wooden pagan gods in his dad's basement, basically. And he took an axe and he chopped up all but the like Zeus god, the main god. And when his dad was like, "What happened?" Abraham, or Abram at the time, basically just said, you know, like, "Oh, one of the other gods tried to take the meat before the main god, and he, in his wrath, he killed all the other ones." His dad's like, "What the F, man? Like, you just, I know this was you. These are just wooden statues. That didn't happen. You did this." And Abram's like, "Exactly. Why do you worship these things that you know aren't real? Why are you worshiping these false gods? And why are you, like, doing what that will and making it seem as though you're worshiping a god while you're doing it?" And his dad's mad, and he takes him to Nimrod, and Nimrod's pissed and everything. He ends up throwing him into a furnace, like in Daniel. And Haran didn't really, he stood on the fence. He said to himself, because Haran was kind of involved because he was like looking after Abraham the whole time, and he was like, he was his brother and he loved him and cared for him. And he must have known that, he probably honored his dad, but he must have known his dad wasn't that great of a guy. But he was on the fence, you know, when they threw, he saw it, Jasher says, he said in his heart, Haran did, "If Abraham lives, I will say I'm with Abraham, and if he dies, I will say I'm with my father," you know, and he's just on the fence ahead of time. Abraham lives, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm with Abraham," but then Haran's thrown in the fire also, and he dies, you know, and it's because his faith wasn't strong enough, sort of thing. You know, his heart wasn't true, whatever you want to call it. Now, to say Haran's condemned, I don't know. I don't know if I would go that far, or maybe he is. I mean, we can see good in him, I think, but I think he's redeemed through his son for sure, because Lot is very heroic. And that just kind of goes, it's not a biblical story, but it goes to show, you know, it doesn't pay to be on the fence on things. You know, and there are a lot of issues where I'm just like, whatever. You know, there are plenty of things in life where it doesn't matter. But in the important things, like God and your brothers being thrown into a furnace for chopping up wooden statues, you know, there's some things that you shouldn't be on the fence for. And I feel like those are some of them. All right, so that's 28. Oh, a quick reference to, so that you can kind of see that I'm not just full of crap here. Within the Bible, so Genesis 15, verse 7 here. Let me read it. So this is the covenant with Abraham, and he said unto him, "I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it." So he's talking about how God's the one who brought him out of that land. Now, obviously, people are going to say God's just the one who told him to go there. But there are many other versions of the Bible. I'm reading the King James, and most believe it to be the most accurate. That's why I use it. But there are plenty others that say that I brought you out of the fire. I believe the Septuagint one, I believe the Ethiopian one says that. I could be wrong, but there are plenty of references where it talks about, plenty, I shouldn't say plenty. There are other versions where it talks about brought you out of the furnace, not the furnace, the fire. All right. Anyway, believe it or not, like, it's not really important, but that's just like, there's all kinds of things, like you just mentioned Haran died, like how, you know, or we just be like, oh, maybe he got cancer, you know, something like that. Usually the Bible is clear unless it's something that is already kind of known or established within the Jewish community. So it's already known, you know, and it's not an important enough detail to mention how Haran died. So again, it's not important for faith. It's just interesting to talk about, and there are other references that you can go to find out. And it does help to explain things, especially when you're talking to skeptics. Verse 29. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, with an I. I always see it with an H or nothing on the end, you know? You never see it with an I. And the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Isaac, Ishka. All right. So it's just describing the marriages here, and then, yeah. So they're kind of married, doing a little bit of distant, but sort of cousin marrying here, which was common back then. All right, get over it. It's just kind of what happened. Yeah. But, so they're getting married, whatnot. Verse 30 here, it says, but Sarah was barren. She had no child. So we know, well, maybe we don't. We'll get into the story of Sarah's barrenness. Let's just say she wasn't always barren. Boom. Talk about late life surprise for her and Abraham. Okay, so verse 31. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, and his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, and his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran, and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So Terah dies at 205 years. Now, maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't think there's anyone else that lives past 200, at least not distinct person. So I find it funny that it says Terah takes his household, but right after that is the call of Abraham, where it talks about how the Lord called Abraham out to go to the land of Canaan. I think that's just kind of the culture of the time, that it was still Terah's household, you know, and honor thy father and all that stuff, that he went with them. But more than likely what happened is Nimrod kicked him out. You know, he was probably mad at him. And there's more to it in the book of Jasher, kind of about how basically Abraham, and this stuff is why I think it's not in the Bible, because I don't know if everything can be totally trusted within all these other ones. But I don't see anything blasphemous about it. But basically Abraham's birth was predicted, not as a Messiah or anything like that, but, you know, Samson's birth was predicted too. And Nimrod was kind of worried about it, and he told Terah to kill him. And that's why Abraham kind of ran away and was basically raised by Noah and Shem. And when Nimrod found out that this dude was still alive, he obviously must have feared God enough not to. He tried killing him, threw him in fire, but then after that he was probably too scared to do anything else, so he just kicked Terah out of his service, more than likely, or Terah left in shame. Because from then on, other than, he dies at 205 years, it doesn't really say much. And maybe Abraham converted him. I mean, that's the whole thing that it talks about. Not to get ahead of myself, but in the next verse or so, it talks about how many souls Abraham brought with him in the next chapter out of the land of Ur in the Chaldees. And basically what Abraham was doing was converting people. He was going around like an apostle preaching the word of, it was Christ's word. Like, he is preaching the message of God, which is is the word of God. It's Christ. He's preaching the message of Christ long ago. And he's gaining souls, and then they're called out into the land of Canaan. Alright, so that is the end of chapter 11. I've had a wonderful evening. I found out tomorrow is a snow day, so I get to stay home. And I got 3 chapters done. Each one was a lot of fun. Alright, so one more time, let's wrap this up. They're getting less and less lives as they go on, which falls along with the second law of thermodynamics. Christ is basically the one coming down and talking to them. Talking to God. He's like, hey, this place is all thinking they're hot stuff. You know, they're building a tower. They're starting a civilization. They're trying to conquer the world. They think they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and any expense to the people around them or to your honor. And so, but they're also real arrogant, and they like so hide and hoard their knowledge, like secret society stuff, you know. So let's use that against them, Dad, because Christ comes down, he goes and makes the report to God the Father. He's like, I got an idea how to scramble them up. I'll use their own, you know, greed against them by holding on to their own each cultural hidden knowledge that they think their father gave them and no one else, instead of sharing amongst each other to help out the community as a whole. I mean, they're helping out in the building and glorifying of themselves in every way, but they're not. But they think they're all hiding their own secret knowledge, so they got to stay in their own groups, which creates their own language, which means they can't communicate with each other. Or God just snapped his hand. Moving on, they leave the land because basically Abraham is preaching the word of God, and Nimrod and those people aren't too happy about it. Terah takes his household out of him, but it's basically Abraham doing it. I mean, it's his household. Terah is the eldest, so they give him respect. But in chapter 12, right away, they just start talking about it, even though Terah's still alive. The aspect of this chapter as Abraham's the one running the show. So that's about it. They leave Ur and they're going to the land of Canaan. And we'll get into the call of Abraham and why he's going to Canaan. Again, this is kind of going back almost. It's showing that it's not Terah's house anymore, even though the last few verses there kind of says Terah took his household. It's Abraham doing it. They're just giving Terah like some respect. Alright, everyone have a great night. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope, if nothing else, this causes people to look into the Bible and study it and try and find God, you know. I see all this stuff on TV all the time, and you know, my girlfriend and I just the other day were watching a documentary about minimalism, and they're talking about how it's filled this void in their heart. Now, I'm not a seeker or anything like that, but that void that people are feeling is this. It's a connection to God. Now, you can connect through it in your own way. You don't have to just strictly study the Bible. Obviously, study of the Bible is important, but you can come to God in other ways, just prayer, meditation, and trying to better yourself and trying to know more about Christ's message every single day. And trying to be a good person. Just help your neighbor out. It really feels good. It's not like you don't have to still have a sense of humor about life. You can't still enjoy things. But you need to try your best to be a good person. And what I hope, if anyone ever sees this, they just see that this is fascinating stuff. It's fun to study the Bible. It's fun to talk about. There's no reason why we can't have this discourse in the real world. Just in there, I won't have a robe on. I promise. God bless.